Hello, everyone. For the Module 9 discussion, I'm going to outline an example of a comparative advertising campaign, starting with the Super Bowl advertisement in 2019. As part of their effort to gain favorable place in the minds of consumers, Bud Light released an ad highlighting that Miller Lite and Coors Light both use corn syrup in their brewing process. This campaign led to a ton of controversy, and I'll cover a few parts of this, but I encourage everyone to watch the link to the commercial in the notes below my video beforehand. Once you watch the commercial, it's clear that Bud Light is using a very aggressive comparative advertising campaign, and this leads to a couple of topics of discussion. So first, Miller Lite responded with commercials of their own, which started with the comparative advertising campaign back and forth between both brands. Rather than refute or address the claims of corn syrup, Miller Lite ran a campaign where they staged actors from the Bud Light commercials drinking Miller Lite off the set and went with the tagline, "In the real world, more taste is what matters." This campaign largely went over well as it highlighted a benefit of Miller Lite that people could relate to. However, a lot of the damage was still done by the corn syrup campaign by Bud Light. Mainly, there was a perception that corn syrup was a negative and unhealthy because most consumers would associate corn syrup with high fructose corn syrup, which has been demonized by health experts. Miller Lite and Coors Light also argued in court that their beer doesn't contain corn syrup, but rather the corn syrup is used as part of the brewing process to feed the yeast. The war on corn syrup by Bud Light had other effects as well. Bud Light and their calling out of corn syrup offended the piece of their consumer base in the middle of America where corn farmers make their livelihood off the crop. Demonizing corn syrup to put it in the same light as high fructose corn syrup was intentionally deceptive, and farmers in Iowa specifically were offended enough that it made local news stories, and farming coalitions spoke out against the campaign. Another potentially unforeseen effect of the campaign was Bud Light drawing attention to the health concerns of beer in general. Forbes wrote an article about how this campaign may have been a bit short-sighted because beer drinkers are already stressed and concerned about ingredients. Over the long term, confusing consumers could hurt the entire light beer industry. And honestly, we're starting to see that now with people liking to drink seltzers and drink ready-to-drink cocktails, stuff like High Noon and White Claw, which I'm sure you guys are really familiar with that trend. And as a result of the campaign, there were also a few legal outcomes that were noteworthy. First, as mentioned earlier, there was seemingly intentional deception on the corn syrup usage for a variety of reasons, but Bud Light still was able to associate the negative feelings around high fructose corn syrup with their competition. After some time, the courts ruled in favor of Bud Light, since it's technically not false or misleading as corn syrup is used in the brewing process. The court went even so far to suggest that if Miller Lite didn't like the campaign, they too could mock Bud Light in return, which is interesting in the context of our course and the idea of competitive advertising. There's a few things to consider here, and I just want to kind of throw some questions out to the entire class. But first is competitive advertising worth the potential controversy? Obviously, this campaign got a lot of attention, so you could argue that it was. Secondly, was Bud Light's message right for such a huge investment in a Super Bowl ad? We all know how much a Super Bowl ad costs. It was outlined in the module and in our textbook. And were they better suited highlighting some of their benefits, like Forbes had suggested, or were they fine with the message that they had? Next, I would ask, is Bud Light using corn syrup's inclusion in the brewing process ethical? Since it seems like it's intentionally trying to associate with high fructose corn syrup, which is technically kind of deceptive. Was that the ethical thing for them to do, or was it worth all that controversy that they stirred up? And then the last question I'll ask is, was Miller Lite right to engage, and did they use the right messaging in their ad? They went with sort of we're going to highlight our own benefits and not really talk much about what's wrong with Bud Light, but rather say ours tastes better and it's better for enjoying, and that the people who were in the Bud Light commercial likely drank a Miller Lite afterwards and when they got off set, which was a little tongue in cheek, but I thought it was a pretty good message in response. But I'm excited to see what everybody has to say, and I thank you guys for your time and watching this.